Welcome to Reformed Thinking.
It is good to be here.
We were doing something a little different today. Usually we take a pretty broad theological concept.
Right, like justification or sanctification.
Yeah, and we look at it from 10,000 feet. But today, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to zoom in. I mean, all the way in.
Mm-hmm.
We are looking at a single word.
Just one word.
One Hebrew word. But it is a word that controls literally every aspect of your life. It controls when you wake up, when you eat, how you feel about your career. And honestly, it is probably the source of about 90% of the anxiety you feel on a daily basis.
That is a pretty bold claim for one little word.
I stand by it. Because today we are doing a deep dive into time.
Time.
And before we get into the Hebrew and the theology, I have to confess something. My relationship with time is, well, it is not great. It is actually pretty hostile.
Hostile. How so?
Yes, hostile. I feel like I am in a constant fistfight with the clock. I view time as this, scarce resource that I am just hemorrhaging. Every minute that ticks by is a minute I have lost. I am trying to manage it, save it, send it wisely, but mostly I just feel like it is slipping through my fingers. I am running out of it.
You and everyone else in the modern world, we are totally obsessed with the shortage of time. We treat it like a bank account that is constantly being drained, and we cannot make any more deposits.
That is it. It's a ticking clock. It is a linear countdown.
Here is the problem with that perspective. It is exhausting. It is anxiety-inducing, and most of all, for our discussion today, it is not how the Bible talks about time.
And that is the hook. That is why we are here. Because we are two Protestant Christians. We hold to the Westminster Confession. We believe in a high view of God's sovereignty. And yet, we often live like atheists when it comes to our calendars.
We really do. We act as if time is this autonomous machine that is eating us alive, rather than a creation of God.
So we dug into the sources. We pulled the lexicons Brown Driver Briggs, Elot, the theological word book of the Old Testament. We looked at the usage in the Septuagint, and we found that the primary Hebrew word for time in the Old Testament suggests something radically different than a ticking clock.
It does. The word is eth.
Eth.
Yeah.
Spelled ayin tav.
And if we can wrap our heads around what this word actually means and what it does not mean, it changes everything. It shifts us from managing a schedule to trusting in providence.
So let's get into the weeds, or I guess into the roots, because looking at the etymology of this word, the history of where it comes from is actually a bit of a detective story.
It is a bit messy right out of the gate, to be honest. If you open the Brown Driver Briggs lexicon, which is sort of the gold standard for biblical Hebrew definitions, they actually struggle to pin down where this word comes from. It is a very ancient word.
It appears, nearly 300 times?
Roughly 296 times in the Old Testament. So it is very common. But scholars are divided on its parentage. There are two main camps here, and the difference between them is massive theologically.
Okay, lay out Camp A for us.
Camp A suggests that eth comes from the root e, spelled e-nun-he. Now, in ease means to answer, or to respond, or to occur.
To answer.
Right. So, if you are in this camp, you view time as something that presents itself. It is a reaction, an event happens, and the time is the response to that event. It is a very fluid, almost passive way of looking at it. Things just, occur.
But looking at our notes and looking at how Reformed theologians usually handle this, we don't think that is the right take, do we?
Most of us don't. Grammatically, it is a bit of a stretch, but more to the point, it doesn't fit the way the word is actually used in Scripture. We lean toward the second camp. This is the view supported by scholars like Bauer and others. They trace eth to the root eat, spelled yod ayin dalet.
Yud. And what does that mean?
This is where the lights turn on. Yod doesn't mean to answer. It means to appoint, to designate, or to fix.
To fix, as in fastened in place, not to repair something that is broken.
Precisely. Think of a peg driven into a wall. It is fixed. It is designated. If this is the true root, and we believe it is, then biblical time isn't a flowing river of seconds. It is a series of fixed points. It is a series of appointments.
That is a huge shift. We're moving from flow to appointment.
And it gets better. This root connects eth to another very weighty Hebrew word, ida.
I know that word. Ida means congregation, right? Like the assembly of Israel.
Yes. But why? Why is the word for church or gathering related to the word for time?
I've never thought about that.
Because a congregation isn't just a random crowd. It is an appointed meeting. It is a group of people who have agreed to be at a specific place at a specific moment. And Ida is a gathering by appointment.
So ETH time itself carries that same DNA. It is a meeting.
It is. A time in the Bible is not just a blank slot on a calendar waiting for you to fill it. It is a fixed moment. It is a designated encounter. If the root is Eid, then eth implies a time that has been appointed by God.
This fits perfectly with the Westminster Confession, doesn't it? God from all eternity did, by the most wise and holy counsel of his own will, freely and unchangeably ordain whatsoever comes to pass.
That is the connection. We believe God has foreordained. He has appointed whatsoever comes to pass. He hasn't just wound up the clock and let it run. He has appointed the specific moments. So when we encounter an eth, we are encountering something God has set.
It is not empty duration. It is a date on God's calendar.
That is a highly accurate way to put it. And we can see this distinction even more clearly if we look at how the ancient translators handled this word. We have to look at the Septuagint.
The Greek translation of the Old Testament.
Right. A couple of centuries before Christ, Jewish scholars translated the Hebrew scriptures into Greek. Now, Greek has a much more specific vocabulary for time than Hebrew does. Greek basically has two main words, chronos and kairos.
I think many of our listeners might have heard this distinction in a sermon before, but let's break it down because it is crucial here. Chronos is
Where we get chronological, chronometer, chronic. It is quantitative time. It is the ticking clock. It measures duration. If I ask you how long you waited in line and you say 10 minutes, you are talking about chronos. It is a container that you fill.
And kairos?
Kairos is qualitative. It is the right time. It is the season, the opportunity, the decisive moment. It is not about how many minutes pass. It is about the significance of the event. If I say it is time to get married, I am not talking about 2:00 p.m. I am talking about the season of life. That is kairos.
So you have these translators, they see the Hebrew word s. They have to pick a Greek word. Do they pick the clock word, chronos, or the opportunity word, kairos?
This is the data point that really blew my mind when I was reviewing the sources. Remember, chi appears 296 times. How many times do you think they translated as chronos, the quantity word?
Given how we usually think about time, I would assume a lot, like at least half.
Why?
Wait, only twice. Out of 296.
Only twice. But they translated it as kairos, the quality word, the opportunity word, 162 times, and another 26 times they used hora, which means hour or moment. Essentially the same idea.
That is overwhelming. That is a landslide.
It is. It tells us that for the Hebrew mind and for the early Greek translators, Hirth was almost never about duration. It wasn't about how long. It was about the point in time, the occasion.
So when we read time in the Old Testament, we shouldn't be thinking of a timeline stretching out. We should be thinking of specific points on a map.
Yes, it is the occasion when something happens. And we actually see this outside the Bible, too. The sources mention the Lashish letters.
Oh, right, the pottery shards.
Yeah, these are ancient Hebrew ostraka, military correspondence written right before the Babylonians destroyed Judah. And in those real-world historical dispatches, they use this concept. They talk about watching for the signal fires of Lachish according to all the signs, the appointed times given by the commander.
So it wasn't just a high-minded theological concept. It was how they lived. You watch for the signal at the appointed F.
Exactly. It grounds this whole idea in real history.
Our sources list a bunch of phrases where this pops up in the text. Let's look at a few because they really paint a picture. One of those common ones is bieth ha-hai.
At that time, it is used 68 times. You see it constantly in Deuteronomy and Jeremiah.
At that time. It sounds like a storyteller's phrase, you know? Like,
Yeah.
once upon a time.
But it is actually the total opposite of Once Upon a Time. Once Upon a Time is vague. It is a fairy tale. Bieth ha-hai is specific. It locates God's acts in real history. When Moses uses that phrase, he is saying at that specific appointed moment in history, God did this. It anchors our faith in reality, not mythology.
And then you have the phrase for the present, keth.
At this time or now, it is used to grab immediate attention.
There is a specific usage of that which caught my eye in the source material. Genesis 18:10. This is the story of Abraham and Sarah.
Yes. This is when the Lord visits them by the oaks of Mamre. Sarah is barren. She is old. Humanly speaking, her time for having children is long gone. The biological clock has stopped ticking.
But God says something interesting,
He says, I will surely return to you, Kayath Haya.
which is usually translated about this time next year,
Right, but literally it means at the time of life or when the time revives.
the time of life.
God sets an eth. He sets an appointment for life to begin. Even when the chronos, the chronological age, says it is impossible, God brings the kairos.
It really drives home the theological point. We don't decide when life begins. We don't manage that schedule. God sets the time of life.
And that applies to everything, not just human life, but the life of the world around us. If we look at how F is used in nature, we see that God is the Lord of the seasons. He is the God of the calendar of creation.
Let's move into that. Section 2 of our outline focuses on providence in nature. Because I think we, especially as modern people, we have a very mechanistic view of nature. We think, okay, the Earth tilts on its axis, the sun hits the equator, the seasons change. It is just physics.
We view it as a clockwork universe. God wound it up at the Big Bang and walked away, but the Bible doesn't see it that way. The sources show Eth being used for harvest, for rain, for migration.
Right. Jeremiah 51.33 mentions the time of harvest. Ezra 10.13 talks about the time of rain. Deuteronomy 11.14 promises rain in its season.
Beato, in its time. This is where we see the doctrine of common grace and providence intersecting.
Can you define common grace for us? We use that term a lot in Reformed circles, but just to be clear.
Sure. Common grace is the favor God shows to all of his creation, regardless of whether they are saved or not. The sun rises on the evil and the good. The rain falls on the just and the unjust. That regularity, the fact that we can plant a seed and expect it to grow, is God's kindness.
So nature isn't just operating on autopilot.
No. The Hebrew worldview sees nature as operating because God is constantly decreeing the right time for the rain to fall and the harvest to be ready.
It is personal.
It is intensely personal. Psalm 104.27 says all creatures look to God to give them their food in due season. Beito.
I love that image.
Think about it. The lions, the ravens, the fish, they aren't waiting on the laws of physics or a biological algorithm. They are waiting on God to mark the appointment for dinner. They are looking to his hand.
So the creation is in sync with the Creator's appointments.
Yes, completely.
But we aren't.
No, we aren't. And there's a stinging rebuke in the book of Jeremiah that brings this out. Jeremiah 8.7.
I have it here. Even the stork in the heavens knows her times, and the turtle dove, swallow, and crane keep the time of their coming. But my people know not the rules of the Lord.
The stork knows her Eth.
It is amazing when you think about migration. A bird with a brain the size of a pea knows precisely when to lift off and fly thousands of miles. It knows the appointment.
It submits to the Aelth God designed for it. It doesn't argue. It doesn't say, I am busy right now, I will migrate next week. It keeps the time.
But my people know not the rules of the Lord.
That is the tragedy of the human condition. We are the only creatures who fight the calendar. We want to set our own times. We want the harvest when we want it, not when it is appointed. We want success on our timeline. We want relief on our timeline.
And that rebellion creates so much of the anxiety we feel. We are fighting the appointment. We are out of sync.
We are trying to be the Lord of time, but that position is already filled.
This leads us naturally to the most famous passage about time in the entire Bible. You cannot talk about this topic without addressing the elephant in the room, or rather, the poem in the room.
You mean the one verse even people who have never touched a Bible know by heart?
Ecclesiastes chapter 3. The Byrds wrote a song about it in the 60s. To everything turn, turn, turn.
For everything there's a season, and a time for every matter under heaven.
But here is my issue with how that passage is usually taught. It feels resigned. Like, hey, sometimes you cry, sometimes you laugh, circle of life, deal with it. It feels very fatalistic, or just like a generic observation of the world.
That is the Stoic interpretation. It is the idea that the universe is just a wheel and you are stuck on it. But if you look at the Hebrew text, Solomon isn't engaging in Stoicism. He is engaging in high theology. He uses our word if repeatedly.
A time to be born and a time to die.
If we stick to our definition, that if means an appointment or a decree, this isn't just an observation of nature, it is a legal declaration. God has appointed a time to be born. God has appointed a time to die. God has appointed a time to plant and a time to pluck up.
So these aren't just things that happen randomly. They are appointments on God's calendar.
Yes. And that changes how we handle suffering. It means the suffering isn't an accident, it is an if. It is a season appointed by a sovereign God.
A time to weep and a time to laugh. That means God has decreed a specific moment for my tears.
He has, and if he has decreed the tears, he has a purpose for them. It is not senseless pain.
There is a fascinating distinction in the sources about the right time versus the wrong time. Because F often implies the proper time.
Yes. Ecclesiastes 10.1 says, Blessed is the land whose princes feast at the proper time. Bave.
So there's a right time for feasting.
Timing is moral. If you feast at 9:00 a.m. when you should be working, that is drunkenness or gluttony. If you feast at the appointed time after the work is done, it is celebration. The action is the same, eating and drinking, but the F makes it right or wrong.
That is a deep thought. The timing sanctifies the action.
But then there is that tricky verse, you know the one, Ecclesiastes 7.17.
Be not foolish, why should you die before your time?
Before your time. Belo etika. This creates a bit of a theological headache, doesn't it?
It really does. If we just said that God appoints the time to die in Ecclesiastes 3, how can Ecclesiastes 7 say we can die before our time? Is God confused?
No, God is not confused.
Oh.
We have to distinguish between God's secret decree and our human responsibility.
Break that down for us.
From the perspective of God's secret decree, his eternal plan, our days are numbered. Nothing catches God by surprise. You aren't going to die 1 second earlier than he ordained. But the Bible often speaks from the perspective of human responsibility and the general course of nature.
So practically speaking,
If you live foolishly, if you drive drunk, if you engage in violence, you are likely to shorten your life relative to what it could have been naturally. We look at it and say, that was premature. That was not the EF for a natural death.
it is a warning against wickedness, not a loophole in sovereignty.
Correct. It doesn't negate God's sovereignty, but it stresses that our actions have consequences in time.
But then we have Ecclesiastes 3.11. God has made everything beautiful in its time.
Be Edo. In its appointed time, this is the comfort. We see the pixel. God sees the whole image.
I really like that analogy.
We see a time to mourn, and it feels like a disaster. It feels ugly. But God sees how that dark pixel fits into the beautiful image he is creating.
The source notes mention that human limitation here is the problem. He has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end.
We are stuck in the timeline. We cannot see the full calendar, so we have to trust the one who holds the pen. We trust that the F is beautiful, even if it feels painful right now.
There's one more verse in Ecclesiastes I want to hit because it's another one that people get wrong. Ecclesiastes 9.11. Time and chance happen to them all.
Time and chance. Ethwa piga.
Now, when a modern person hears chance, they think of Las Vegas. They think of randomness, luck, rolling the dice. Is the Bible saying that sometimes things just happen randomly outside of God's control?
Absolutely not. That would contradict the rest of Scripture. We don't believe in a God who says, oops, I didn't see that coming.
What does pega mean?
Pega doesn't mean random luck. It means an occurrence, an incident, or even an encounter. It comes from a root meaning to meet or to fall upon.
So it is a meeting.
It is an intersection. Time and occurrence happen to them all. It means that for everyone, swift or slow, strong or weak, there is an intersection where their timeline meets an event.
And since God controls the F, he controls that intersection.
Yes. From our vantage point, looking through the windshield of our car, it looks like chance. It looks like bad luck that the flat tire happened on the way to the big interview. But from the Reformed interpretation, that chance encounter is actually a divinely overseen if. It is an appointment we didn't see coming.
That is deeply reassuring. It means there is no such thing as bad luck in the Christian life.
There is only providence.
I want to shift gears a bit. We have talked about time in nature, time in our personal lives. But the Bible also uses F in a much heavier, more prophetic sense. If God has appointments for reign and for birth, he also has appointments for nations.
We have to address the prophetic if. The prophets, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, they use this word like a hammer.
One of the key phrases in the source material is eth pekuda.
If pekuda, the time of visitation or the time of punishment. You see this in Jeremiah 8.12 and 10.15.
Now, visitations sounds polite to modern ears, like a neighbor stopping by for coffee.
In the Bible, when God visits, it is rarely for coffee. It is an inspection. It is an intervention. When the prophets warn of an eth pekuda, they are saying, God has an appointment on his calendar to come and judge this sin.
It is fixed. It is inescapable.
It is. Nations might think they are getting away with injustice. They might think God is asleep. But Jeremiah says, no, there is an eth. The appointment is set. The auditor is coming.
And there's also ethra.
The time of trouble or time of evil,
Yeah.
Jeremiah 14.8, Psalm 37.39. These are seasons of distress appointed by God for discipline or judgment.
It is sobering. But it also leads us to the absolute end. The book of Daniel uses eth to talk about the end of history.
Eskretz, the time of the end, Daniel 8.17, Daniel 12.1.
This is where the linear view of history really shines through, isn't it?
It is a fundamental part of our worldview. Many ancient cultures, and even some modern philosophies, view time as cyclical. It is an endless loop repeating itself. Reincarnation, the circle of life. History goes nowhere, it just spins.
But the Bible says,
The Bible says time is an arrow, it is going somewhere, it has a telos, a goal, there is a fixed eth kretz, there is a finish line appointed by God. History is not an open-ended loop, it is a story with a conclusion.
the sources mention the time of the Gentiles in Ezekiel 30.3.
Nations have their hour, they have their eth. Rome had its time, Babylon had its time, the modern superpowers have their time, but God limits it. No empire lasts forever because God has not appointed an eternal ith for them. Only his kingdom has no end.
This idea of a fixed end creates a sense of urgency, and that brings us to the adverb derived from eth, the word ata.
Ata, it means now.
It is just eighth modified.
Essentially, it is the immediate time. And in Deuteronomy 10.12, we hear, "And now, Israel, what does the Lord require?"
And
because God controls the eth. When he says now, it demands immediate obedience. It is the urgency of the gospel. Now is the day of salvation. We don't own the future eth. We don't know if we have tomorrow. We only have the ata, the now, to respond.
there's a verse in Psalm 119.126 that really struck me in the notes. It is time for the Lord to act.
Ethlos, la, yhwh, it is time to do for Yahweh, or it is time for Yahweh to do. It is a plea.
It sounds impatient.
It is urgent. The psalmist looks at the wickedness in the world, people breaking God's law, and he says, God, the appointment must be close. Intervene in history. Mark the time. Do something.
It is a prayer for God to keep his appointment with justice.
And we know he will. He is never late.
Okay, we have covered a lot of theological ground. Etymology, nature, judgment, history. But I want to land this plane on the personal level. For you, the listener, who might be driving to work or folding laundry or sitting in a hospital waiting room right now, what does Toth mean for you today?
Section 5 of our outline focuses on this pastoral application. And there is one verse that, for me, sums up the entire Reformed view of time. It is Psalm 31.15.
My times are in your hand.
Biadka itotai.
Now, I have read that 100 times,
Mm-hmm.
and I always pictured it as a singular thing. Like my lifespan is in your hand, like God is holding a stopwatch for my life. But the source notes point out something quite interesting here. It is not singular.
No, it is plural. Itotai. My times.
Why plural? Why not just say my life?
Because our life is not one monolithic block. It is made up of many different iths, the vicissitudes, the ups and downs.
The chapters.
Exactly. The chapter of poverty, the chapter of wealth, the chapter of health, the chapter of sickness, the time of raising toddlers, and the time of the empty nest. Those are all different times.
So when David says, my times are in your hand, he is saying all of these different episodes, you are holding them.
He doesn't say my clock is in your hand. He says my events, my destinies, my crises are in your hand.
Let's talk about the comfort of that. Because that is the core of the Reformed faith, finding comfort in God's sovereignty. But honestly, sometimes it is hard to trust. It is easy to believe God controls the day I die. It is much harder to believe he controls a time of the flat tire or the time of the layoff.
Think about the alternatives. If my times were in my own hands,
I would be a wreck. I would be anxious constantly. I would be trying to manipulate every outcome. I would be crushed by the weight of trying to be my own providence.
You aren't strong enough to hold your times. You would drop them.
And if they were in the hands of my enemies.
Which is what David feared in the context of Psalm 31. He had enemies surrounding him, people who wanted to destroy him. If his times were in their hands, he would be in despair. He would be hopeless.
But since they are in God's hands,
We have security. We have peace. We know that the one holding our times, the scary ones and the happy ones, is the same, one who appointed the seasons for the stork and the rain. He is good, and he is sovereign.
it brings to mind the Heidelberg Catechism, seeing as we are doing Reformed thinking here, that without the will of my Heavenly Father, not a hair can fall from my head.
That is the spirit of itotai. My appointments are held by him.
There is one more famous passage we have to touch on before we wrap up. It is in the outline under Esther 4.1 scene. This brings the sovereignty of time right down to our choices.
This is Mordecai speaking to Queen Esther. She is in a position of authority, but her people are facing genocide. She is terrified to act.
And Mordecai says,
Who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Lieth Kazoth.
for a time like this.
This brings the doctrine of predestination right down to human agency. God places his people in specific specific moments for his purposes.
Esther wasn't queen by accident. She wasn't there because she won a beauty pageant and got lucky.
No. The was prepared for her, and she was prepared for the God matched the person to the appointment.
And that applies to us too, doesn't it?
It has to. You are not living in the 21st century by accident. You are not in your specific job or family or neighborhood by random chance. You have been placed there liath kazoth, for such a time as this.
That gives so much dignity to our daily lives. We aren't just punching a clock. We are stepping into divine appointments.
And we are stewards of the eth. We don't own the time, but we are called to occupy it faithfully.
So let's summarize what we have learned about ith today. It is not a ticking clock.
No, it is an appointed time,
Huh.
a season, an opportunity. It is a moment of judgment, and it is a moment of grace. It is a meeting place between God's decree and our reality.
And it is almost entirely distinct from the Greek concept of chronos, or duration. It is about the quality and purpose of the moment.
That is the big takeaway. Stop counting the minutes and start looking for the purpose of the appointment.
We usually end with a final provocative thought, something for you, the listener, to mull over. What have you got for us?
Well, looking at the sources, there's a reference in Hosea 10.1. It says, "It is time to seek the Lord, eth
Time to see.
Here is the challenge. If God holds every eth in his hand, and if he has appointed this very moment right now for you to be listening to this deep dive, then this is an appointment. It is not an accident.
So the question is,
What is the duty of the day required of you right now? If this moment is an eth from God, how are you supposed to fill it? Are you seeking him in it? Or are you just trying to get through it?
we do not own our time. We are stewards of God's appointments.
That is the thought to carry with you.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into eth. We hope it changes the way you look at your calendar this week. Reflect on your own times.
And remember, they are in good hands.
Until next time.